Let's talk about one of history's great ironies. We're going to dive into how one of Napoleon Bonaparte's biggest military failures somehow ended up shaping our modern world in a way his victories never, ever could. When you hear that name, Napoleon, what do you picture? Probably a brilliant general, right? Maybe the short emperor, or the guy who famously lost at Waterloo. But what if I told you his most lasting legacy wasn't a battle, but a book? You see this image of the conqueror on his horse? It's all about power and glory. But his real, lasting story is completely tied to this place, the land of the pharaohs. And in this just wild twist of fate, his attempt to conquer Egypt failed, spectacularly. But in doing so, he somehow managed to conquer the imagination of the entire world instead. So how on earth did that happen? Well, to really get this incredible paradox, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning of his Egyptian campaign, an expedition that was, let's just say, a little weird from the very start. Okay, so on the surface, the plan seemed pretty logical. Napoleon was only 28, and he wanted to hit his biggest rival, Great Britain, where it hurt, by cutting off their access to India. But here's the thing. Napoleon had a totally different, almost secret objective in mind. This was no ordinary army. Along with his 40,000 soldiers, Napoleon brought this whole other legion of over 150 of France's absolute best and brightest. They called them the savants. You see, his goal wasn't just to conquer a piece of land. It was to document, to understand, and basically to download the knowledge of an entire civilization. And because he had these two totally different goals, the results were, well, they were polar opposites. Militarily, the whole thing was a catastrophe. But scientifically, it turned out to be one of the greatest successes in history. The contrast is just stunning. So while the British Admiral Nelson is busy destroying the French fleet at sea and half of Napoleon's troops are dying, his team of scholars is making discoveries that would change the world. They were documenting everything, which kicked off the formal study of Egyptology and started this cultural obsession that, let's be honest, has never really left us. But you know what's funny? The single most important find of the whole trip, the one thing that unlocked ancient Egypt for the rest of us, wasn't found in some grand tomb or ancient temple. Nope, it was found by a bunch of soldiers just digging in the dirt. Yep, we are talking about the one and only Rosetta Stone. This slab of rock was the ultimate cheat sheet. Why? Because scholars could already read classical Greek, so they finally had a way to decode those mysterious hieroglyphics that nobody had been able to read for more than 1,000 years. It was literally like finding the password to an entire lost civilization. And the long-term impact of that one discovery was just immense. It wasn't quick. It took over 20 years, but in 1822, a French genius named Jean-François Champollion finally cracked the code. Using the Rosetta Stone, he opened up the history, the religion, the daily life of ancient Egypt, and it all came from Napoleon's failed invasion. But here's a fascinating little twist. This explosion of interest in all things Egyptian, it wasn't the first time this had happened, not by a long shot. In fact, if you want to find the origins of this craze, you've got to go back even further to another massive empire, ancient Rome. See, this obsession has really deep roots. When Rome conquered Egypt way back around 30 BC, they didn't just take its food, they took its style. They literally dragged huge obelisks all the way across the Mediterranean to put up in their city. It's almost exactly like what Napoleon's team would do centuries later. It's like history was just repeating itself. And they weren't just casual fans either. For the Romans, Egypt felt ancient, mystical, and incredibly powerful. To own a piece of it was the ultimate status symbol. It was a way to link your new empire to one that was far, far older. Napoleon was basically tapping into a very old, very powerful human impulse. Okay, so you have this incredibly detailed academic work from Napoleon's scholars. How in the world does that turn into a full-blown pop culture phenomenon? Well, it all started with this one absolutely monumental publication, the Description of Egypt. We're talking an 11-volume encyclopedia packed with the most beautiful, detailed drawings of everything from massive temples down to the tiny insects of the Nile. As these books started coming out, they caused an absolute sensation across Europe. And this new Egyptomania quickly jumped off the page and into people's homes. Just look at this. It's the bed of Napoleon's own brother, Gérôme. The design is covered in Egyptian figures. It's this over-the-top celebration of a military campaign that was, and we have to remember this, a total failure. It just goes to show you, the idea of the conquest was way more powerful than the reality. And the trend was everywhere. It permeated everything. This is a fabric sample from the Palace of Versailles, and you can see it mixes classic Egyptian symbols right next to Napoleon's own personal logo, the bee. It was this cool fusion of ancient mystery and new imperial power, and it created a whole new look. And that influence, it honestly never left us. Think about the Art Deco skyscrapers in the 1920s, or big Hollywood movies, or even modern fashion and jewelry. The visual style of ancient Egypt is now a permanent part of our culture, and you can draw a direct line right back to that doomed expedition in 1798. So, when you step back and look at this whole crazy story, what's the big takeaway from Napoleon's adventure in Egypt? You know, maybe Napoleon himself actually said it best. His armies lost, his fleet was sunk, but his vision of uncovering and claiming the knowledge of this ancient world, that's what won in the end. He absolutely failed to conquer Egypt, but he completely succeeded in capturing its story for the rest of the world. That's really the heart of it, isn't it? It's the ultimate story of unintended consequences. A war that was supposed to be about strategy turned into a mission of cultural discovery. The greatest victory of the entire Egyptian campaign wasn't military at all. It was intellectual. And this all leaves us with a really tough but really important question for our own time. Sure, the expedition gave us the science of Egyptology, but it was also, without a doubt, an act of colonial power. And it brings up this complex issue we are still wrestling with today. Who gets to tell a nation's history? And who has the right to own its treasures? It's a legacy every bit as complicated and fascinating as the man who started it all.